Northern Dewa Province, summer 1582. While the cicadas droned, humid mists, risen in the brief lull between suffocating rains, lingered among the skyward sugi and wind-gnarled pines of the western Tohoku foothills. They pooled between the ridgelines, muffling the wooded slopes of Yamana in a dreary silence. Within that stillness, seeped in a quiet dread that soaked into every soul. The Yamana lands lay under siege by the Oda clan to the north and west. Though no army camped outside of the castle, the roads were watched and the mountain passes were sealed. Their liege lords, the Nanbu to the east, could no longer reach them. Tucked into this narrow cradle of earth, beneath the crumbling foothills of Akita's more foreboding peaks, the Yamana were utterly cut off. The Yamana village was less to behold, a patchwork of thatched rooftops bowed with damp and moss darkened over time. Thin trails of wood smoke climbed from the few remaining hearths of homes not abandoned or emptied from slaughter. With each year, the harvest had become more meager, and the people became thinner. This day, as every day, fear was thick in the air. Ash rings of campfires had been discovered that morning, hastily doused in the woods just beyond the rice paddies. Also, a farmer had been found with his throat opened and his child missing. To combat this repeated terror, the last barrier guarding the village from complete despair paraded itself once more to champion sanity. 10 samurai of the Yamana clan traveled along the muddy central road. Clad in armor, helm, or jingasa, they followed behind the most senior warrior of the clan, the legendary Yamana Shimasa, nephew and adopted son to the Lord Yamana Saburo. Tall and broad, his strength of body and character seemed enough to hold up the peaks of the mountains, and in him all placed their hope for the clan's endurance. Hayama, more distant in relation to the Lord Yamana, walked beside his older cousin several times removed, and was emboldened when passing their house sigil, the Yamana Sugimon, depicted on Rōnin hung before the smith's workshop. With banners of green or white, the Yamana Munsho depicted the mountain Kotori-san, which bordered the village to the east as the first peak that remained capped in white until middle year. In front of Kotori-san, on the Munsho, were 3 sprouting pine branches splaying out into a trident. Hayama adjusted his kabuto, his helmet, to release the heat trapped atop the nape of his neck. At times such as these, he remembered gratitude for the chonmage hairstyle of the samurai, shaving the top of the head. Using the bun of collected hair from the rest of his head as a cushion for the helmet, the chonmage kept the heat of summer manageable while wearing a helm for long. Hayama asked his cousin,
"Are we going to search for the bandits again? How many times must we run after them like a hound chasing flocking geese? If only those cowards showed themselves, we could cut them through."
Shimasa, returning the deep bow of a peasant with a slighter one, answered Hayama.
"This time will be different. We responded quickly. I sent out the scouts early, and the rains have made the ground soft. I suspect that this time, a trail will be found. These bandits."
Shimasa emphasized this descriptor because of whom both men knew the bandits to be.
"Will not be able to hide from us for much longer."
Hayama twisted his hand upon the weave of his sword, wanting that fight sooner rather than later. He, like all in Yamana, was weary of sleepless nights and attrition, of thieves and murderers in the dark. Better that he could face his enemy straight on, cut him down, or be cut down himself. That should be the way of war, he thought. That men of war fight one battle head to head, and the stronger live, and the weaker die. So be it if he was the weaker man. After 10 years of this, Hayama wanted to get it over with. If Yamana was to be crushed by the Oda clan, let their heavy foot stomp once. Hayama glanced back to the tired men of similar mind to him. They were a mix of veterans and youth. Men like Sato, who served with Shimasa at Numata, and boys like Ichiro, fresh-faced and overburdened by his father's old Domaru armor. Fewer and fewer were Sato's kind. More and more were boys like Ichiro. Yamana was running out of warriors. Continuing the patrol past the village boundary, Hayama searched the horizon constricted by pine and stone. On a sloped hill in the near woods, there was a low wall meant to guard the path from sliding earth. Scarcely taller than a man's waist, it was marked by a faded tate no sho banner sagging from a crooked pole. The patrol stopped. The path split here, leading east towards the mountain passes and Nanbu lands, and north and west towards the Oda. Shimasa took reports from the 3 scouts who were waiting for his arrival. As expected, they returned news of a trail leading away from the slain farmer, moving westward towards Oda lands. The freshness of the tracks gave hope that the bandits might be caught up with, which was a glad utterance to Hayama. The 3 scouts joined in with the patrol, increasing their number to 13, and the man who had given the report led the way. Hurrying, they went west until, when in a lowland, the path doubled back towards the village. Debating the sign with Hayama and the scouts, Shimasa eventually decided that the patrol circle back. With dusk pressing in, Hayama felt his spirit sink. The village lay once more within calling distance, yet the bandits' trail had vanished into the thinning light. Somewhere, back in the higher woods, where the slopes ran dry and the leaf fall covered every sign, the scouts had lost them. With no tracks to reclaim and Yamana so near, the hunt was abandoned once again. Along the raised path threading between the ripening paddies, a field's breadth from the dark edge of the forest, Hayama settled onto the narrow engawa of a weathered shrine dedicated to the harvest-bearing kami, Ukano Mitama. The boards were cool beneath him as the scent of wet earth drifted up from the terraces below. Without room for another to sit, while under the weather-worn, faded red torii gate, Shimasa folded his arms before his cousin, scowling, likely at the disrespect shown to the shrine.
Do you mean to sulk?
Shimasa asked in a deep voice that made children weep and women stumble.
We'll catch up to them, eventually.
Hayama turned towards the closed shutter on the shrine's honden, seeing through the cracks the shintai, an idol carved of wood. He asked,
Do you think if I carve one for courage, the Oura will face us in the open?
If they wanted to destroy us outright, they would have already. They want more of Yamana than to raise our castle.
What could they want of this place?
Hayama showed his hands to the mountains, woods, and terraced rice paddies.
There is nothing here. No wealth or resource in any abundance. Now, too, our warriors are few and our laborers weak. What is there to own?
Sato, among the older men, more knowing of the deeper reasons for the conflict, interjected from the roadside.
The Oda mean to make an example of us. They would show the lesser clans what happens to those who resist them.
Shimasa nodded thoughtfully. Then he spoke towards all the soldiers that they might be informed.
This is true, in part. Politics would have it that other lords might rise up against Oda Tamenobu if his dog, our enemy the General Munenobu, were to crush us completely. Also, the Nanbu would be compelled by honor to avenge us, their sworn vassals, reigniting the worst of the warfare begun a decade ago. As we are the last ally of the Nanbu on the western side of the mountains, we are as though an unhammered nail. Of course, they would rather make an example of us to discredit the Nanbu, rather than embolden their enemies to battle. As easy as it would be for the Oura to crush us, it would be much better for Tamenobu politically if Yamana were to, willingly, submit. Therefore, they siege us. However, I also believe that the General Munenobu has his own plans for Yamana. He has offered himself in marriage to the Lady Tsukiko in exchange for peace. I think that he wishes to own our domain for himself. So, he too would bleed the stubbornness from the Yamana until we were docile. This test of grit and will. While Tamenobu would prove that his clan, the Oura, are the rightful rulers of the north, Munenobu would earn a title and escape the curse of being a common man. However, I for one do not intend to bow to either.
Are they so wrong?
Sato sighed, causing Shimasa to turn a scowl his way. A few of the boys seemed confused by what he meant.
I mean,
He began in his own defense.
what support have the Nanbu sent us? When the Oura's rebellion began, we went over the mountains to fight for them. But what have we earned for our loyalty? They have abandoned us to Munenobu's ambitions. Why does our lord insist on serving our parent clan when we are forsaken?
Enough.
Shimasa growled.
Loyalty is not earned. It is inherent upon oath. Each of us made that oath willingly, to our Lord Yamana, and he to the Lord Nanbu. There is only duty after.
Sato raised his hands, lowered his head, and turned away. Hayama saw value in both men's arguments, but chose not to speak. Their lord was too steadfast in his support of the Nanbu and would not change his mind. That had caused the realm strife, however. Oaths were absolute. That they remain enemies with the Oura was simply their lot. And considering the great suffering the Oura had caused the people of Yamana, Hayama was in no hurry to forgive and cow. Shimasa paced along the road, then exhaled. He declared,
Come, we should get back before dark.
Saying this, a murder of crows burst from the woods 5 stone throws away. A dog barked in repetition, something that Hayama had been ignoring until now. An unsettled feeling grew within him, and standing, Hayama remembered that the bandits' trail had led them back to the village. Had the path ended because the bandits escaped? Hayama passed out of the torii and, counting 12 soldiers, he turned. Ichiro, where is your brother-in-law?
The scout?
Shimasa asked, also looking around to find the man absent.
Daiki, was it? Yes. Where is he?
Ichiro wiped the sweat from his brow, jingasa dangling from his hand. Confusion flickered across his face when a hiss cut through the air. His head snapped back as something needle-thin punched through his eye. He hit the mud before Hayama registered the fletching, an arrow. Another hiss, then another. 2 more youths folded where they stood. The rest of the shots flew wild, skimming overhead or thudding into the banks of the paddies. Hayama felt himself yanked toward the shrine's small Hayden. Shimasa had this time joined him in disrespecting the sanctity of this kami, pulling them both to cover. They pressed up against the small structure, feeling the vibrations of arrows slamming into the other side. The others of the patrol dove behind the low earthen berm between fields, splashing into the water. One boy screamed, abandoned on the road as an arrow had slipped between the plates at his stomach. Sato sprinted back, grabbed him by the shoulder strap, and dragged him behind cover. Then, abruptly, the rain of arrows ceased. Hayama and Shimasa took stock. 2 dead, several wounded. And that gut-shot boy would be out of the fight. Go, attack! Hayama heard from the woods, followed by a war cry. Shortly after, the rice paddies filled with the sounds of splashing. Hayama looked out to find a horde of men dressed in dark clothing and mismatched armor wading through the field. They were slow as they trudged through mud and stepped high to overcome the water.
Bows!
Shimasa ordered. The 4 bows among the patrol popped up, taking a moment to aim, then released. 2 bandits went down. One screamed and whipped about, mirroring the patrol's wounded man in his pitiable form. None stopped to help him as he begged for mercy when wrestling water and mud. The bandits' arrows answered the patrol's, but did little to shelter the exposed men delayed in attack. The patrol's arrows took down near 10 of the bandits before they crossed the field, but their total number was triple that. As the first reached the bank and berm, Shimasa gave the order.
Gift them your steel!
He drew his sword and was the first to the fight. He crashed into the nearest enemy. His blade flashed, cutting the man low across the thigh. Blood sprayed from the wound, dark and sudden. Shimasa kicked, casting the bandit back into the water. Hayama came next. He paused only long enough to haul Sato onto the road, then sprinted after Shimasa. The narrow berm forced the fight into a funnel. Only 2, maybe 3, could clash at once. Off the sides, men slipped in muck or were chained by the ankle in the sucking water. Bandits scrambled up the slope one after another. Seeing how many there were, Hayama barked to his ward Ichinosuke.
Back to the castle!
The boy bolted down the road, weaving through the arrows hissing past him. The crush intensified. Bodies slammed into mud with wet, meaty thumps. A bandit roared forward, swinging a battered nodachi. Hayama caught the blade on the flat of his own, slid aside, and rammed his katana up into the man's armpit. He twisted and withdrew his blade, causing the man to crumble. Another bandit leapt in. Sato rose beside them and cut him down, blood streaking his cheek. Hayama felt something warm leaking down his arm. He was cut, but didn't know when it had happened. Shimasa, Hayama, and Sato pushed into the bandit knot, slicing through bodies like harvesting rice. Soon the road clogged with the dead, and the bandits tripped over their own fallen. As the bandits' numbers thinned, a brief lull came in between. Both sides drew breath and counted. 4 samurai left fighting, 7 bandits on the road. For a deceived moment, Hayama thought that they might break and run, that the fight might be theirs. Instead, more figures burst from the trees, dozens, armed with spears and short swords. The bowmen who began the ambush charged across the paddies, cutting wide to flank. They were coming around, behind them, cutting off the road home. The trap was about to snap shut. Hayama pointed his bloody sword forward, saying,
We're about to be surrounded. I'll go.
Sato said, picking up a spear and ordering the last man with them, a boy named Yuki, to come with. The gut-shot boy also stood to fight, knowing his time for the world would not be much longer. We need to deal with these men quickly, Hayama thought, then go to help Sato. Death was upon them, Hayama was sure of it. Yet now, as he had in long wishing through countless days for this very moment, he only desired to take with him into death as many of these cowardly men as he could. Shimasa, breathing heavy, asked,
Hayama, are you with me? Until the end,
Hayama said, growing a smile as sweat beaded around his lips to slip from his chin. Together they leapt upon the last of the men, their movements one in purpose and rhythm, driving forward to destroy the terror that had plagued their home through long seasons and weary years. Hayama won the initiative, lunging to take a man off guard and cut out his throat. After slaying the first, little effect came from trading blows, so Hayama announced, Switch! Shimasa struck high, Hayama struck low. Shimasa's blade traveled over Hayama's head as they traded places. In the confusion caused, Shimasa struck down his mark, and Hayama gained the momentum to overwhelm and slay his. With 4 remaining, Hayama pushed hard, too hard. The dry ground was more here, allowing the 5th man to flank. With a broad slash, the 5th man struck Shimasa across the brow. Fortunately, the heavy blow was dampened by his helm, but Shimasa's head whipped aside as his helmet was struck from him. Blood from his split brow streamed into his eyes, but he remained upright. Yelling, Switch! Shimasa stepped back, so Hayama could replace him. Hayama quickly did. He closed the distance on the 5th man in a single step. With his free hand, he seized the bandit's sword arm, pinning the blade against the man's own belly and stripping him of any defense. Then Hayama dropped his stance, slid his katana between the man's legs, and drew the edge upward along the inner thigh. Armor left only a few soft places: the throat, eyes, underarm, and the groin. Few warriors struck at that last point, but its effect was immediate. The man's blood poured out from him. He collapsed, clawing at himself in a frantic attempt to plug the leak. After, Hayama quickly withdrew. A sweeping nagamaki caught the rim of his sode, lancing hard enough to jolt his shoulder. Shimasa, half blinded by the blood coming from his forehead, staggered back. His hand found the fallen sashimono of Ichiro, the back-worn banner that warriors use to mark their belonging. He ripped it free, and winding up the cloth, bound Yamana's sigil tight around his brow to stem the flow. He surged back into battle, like a man possessed. His blade rose and fell, hewing through the nearest foe and reducing their number to 2. For a moment, victory seemed possible. Then one of the archers suddenly appeared behind Hayama. He might have won in a surprise attack if his feet were not so loud. Hayama spun on him, blocking, feinting, then cutting him down. Behind, Sato was surrounded. The other 2 men had already died. The archers were running past him, coming towards Hayama and Shimasa. Sato took a yari's point to the back, then a club's blow to the knee, and finally, once he was on the ground, a spear through the heart. A fresh wave of bandits rushed past him, meaning to engulf Shimasa and Hayama. Shimasa roared with fury at the sight of Sato's death, and charged towards the reinforcing bandits. He slashed down 1, then 2. A third and fourth attacked together. Hayama watched as a blade entered just below Shimasa's shoulder. A flash of silver, and Hayama was forced to focus on his own fight. He blocked and circled out when a kick toppled him. From the ground, he cut out a man's ankle. A spear came at him. He rolled, and so fell down the berm. He splashed into the muddy water. The bandits chased him. The first he outplayed, aiming a cut at the man's sword hand, severing several fingers before cutting out his throat. The second tackled him into the water. Hayama gasped from the impact, but instead of air, breathed in water. He was pinned, and craning his neck, only the tip of his nose emerged. In the shallow, he felt aside for his sword, but couldn't find it. Pressure grew in his head, pressing outward as panic overtook sense, telling him to breathe. When finally he lost this battle, his lungs would fill fully with water upon his last breath. Hayama swung wild punches at the man holding him down, which did little save to bloody his fingers upon the man's armor. Yet the weight atop Hayama released. He burst to sitting, coughing and spewing water. He gasped and shuddered, his mind buzzing and shouting. Turning, he spotted Shimasa stabbing the man, before rolling over beside him. Hayama raced to Shimasa's side, but there wasn't much left of the man to hold on to. More dead than alive, he had used his last strength in reaching Hayama. Shimasa grew pale, grabbing Hayama by the collar, trying to say a final word. His eyes glossed over, and he slumped into the water, his armor weighing him down so that nothing could be seen of him save his belt and sword, protruding like a river reed. Hayama stood, ready to die. Little strength remained in him. His knees trembled. He heaved for breath. Blood streamed down his arm, and like a gallery, the bandits, numbering fewer than 20, watched him from the bank. They seemed to hesitate. They seemed weary. Hayama was ready for death, but they did not come. He could see mirrored exhaustion in their stances. First, they exchanged knowing glances to one another. Then Hayama watched in disbelief as they backed away. They retreated down the path the way they had come, leaving their dead and wounded behind.
What? Wait, come back, you cowards!
Hayama bellowed.
Fight me!
Soon the bandits grew small along the road leading towards Oda lands. Hayama stood listless, as blood dripped from his fingertips to mingle with muddy water. All around, the fallen moaned, gurgled, or lay in broken silence. As night continued to creep in, the mist returned, rolling in low over the paddies like a white shroud for the dead. Hayama staggered forward as he spotted a wounded bandit crawling away, dragging a dumb leg. Hayama wordlessly drove his sword into the man's back without slowing. Another tried to plead, raising a hand, but Hayama silenced him with a thrust through the chest. The last living enemy Hayama came upon, he recognized. It was Daiki, a young man who had volunteered as a scout for Yamana after his father had fallen in battle. His wife and child lived in the village, making his betrayal all the more confounding. He lay among the berms, holding his side. His eyes were wide as Hayama approached. He reached for his spear laid beside him, but Hayama's blade went to his throat,
Why?
Hayama demanded, voice low, hoarse. Daiki stared up at him, mouth trembling.
I wanted to live. I wanted my son to live.
You've ensured that he won't.
Hayama leaned closer, pressing his knee into the largest of Daiki's wounds. Daiki gasped in pain.
Your family will be condemned to be slaughtered by the Order because of what you did. And what have they repaid you for this treachery? They abandoned you.
It was just Yamana Shimasa that was supposed to die.
Daiki rasped, turning his gaze away.
Munenobu's men promised. I didn't intend for this to happen. As long as Shimasa lived, our lord had the strength to resist. Now he will have to surrender. Now he will finally come to his senses, that we have already lost. That's all this was. Our lord is too stubborn to see it. We must submit. To survive, we must.
Hayama drew back his sword, slitting Daiki's throat. The younger man died like he was, a snake beheaded. Hayama was held captive and dumb by the sight of the body for a moment, then turned and made his way back up the berm, retracing blood-slicked footsteps. He fell against the torii gate and slumped to seated, resting his back against the pillar. His blood painted it a fresh red that might ward off evil since the old paint was faded. While the air smelled of death, the rice fields below shimmered beautifully in the low light. Like a wounded sea, the fields were pierced by broken banners and protruding limbs. Across it, mist drifted. He closed his eyes. He remained still, like one of the carved Komainu statues guarding the mouth of the village. Time passed without shape. He did not know how long he sat there, slumped against the blood-streaked post of the torii gate. His thoughts drifted without an anchor. Names, faces, voices now still. He could still feel Shimasa's last grip, clinging to his collar as if he might carry his soul away from the water. A vibration awoke him. It was faint at first. The earth shivered beneath him, the tremble of hooves growing louder and stronger until he opened his eyes. From the northern road, a mounted column of 10 or so approached. The green banners of Yamana flared in the wind. At their head rode the Lady Yamana Tsukiko, adorned in jade-green o-yoroi armor, gilded with leafed gold that caught what little light the sky allowed, layered over a sea-blue kimono. She wore no helmet. Her black hair was tied high behind her, trailing like a war banner. The image of her struck Hayama, less like a woman of war than a kami, riding in from the pages of the Kojiki to judge the living and the dead. With her came her onabushi, warrior women, wives, daughters, and sisters of the men who now lay scattered in the fields. Without a wife himself, Hayama wondered if they would burst into tears at the sight of their fallen husbands and sons. Instead, they rode tall and grim, not one among them weeping. Hayama had expected the collapse of grief, but their stoic acceptance was more terrible than screams. One by one they dismounted, approaching the fallen with reverence. Some knelt, placing trembling hands upon armored chests. Others merely stood and bowed. No words or tears fell as they dwelt in reverence and stillness. The Lady Tsukiko, appearing like a vision of Amaterasu herself, stooped in front of Hayama.
Are you all right?
She asked softly. Hayama blinked, reminded by Lady Tsukiko's voice that he was still in the world of the living. He said,
I am.
Regret entrenched itself within him with the admittance that he lived when the others did not. He raised a trembling hand, pointing with 2 fingers toward the waterlogged fields beyond the berm, where Yamana Shimasa, their cousin, his friend and captain, had fallen. Lady Tsukiko's gaze followed the gesture. Her shoulders dipped, as though some invisible weight pressed down upon her. For a beat, her armor seemed too heavy for her slender frame. Then she straightened, her chin lifted. Whatever sorrow she held, she sheathed it. There would be time for sadness later. She said,
Let us get you to the castle.
Hayama nodded. With great effort, he pushed himself from the post of the torii. The world tilted, but Tsukiko offered her hand, and he took it. In that gesture, something shifted, as if these words had been offered. We're not done yet. Mud-slick and blood-stained, alongside the daughter of his lord. Through the ruins of the dusk, toward the distant keep that stood defiant, Hayama returned to mend, that he might fight again. Meanwhile, behind them, the women of Yamana began the quiet work of collecting the dead.